Welcome to the Wonder Podcast. This is your host, CCB, and we are going to be recording I think it's the 62nd or 63rd episode of the Wonder Podcast, which I'm totally thrilled to be able to share with everyone. And I want to remind us all that you can follow us on Apple or Spotify under the Wonder Podcast. And certainly we love to hear what you think about it. So if you want to share information with others or you want to give us feedback, please do. Today's conversation, it struck me when we were setting this up that we at One Workplace talk about building spaces for people to bring their best selves to doing whatever it is that they do in that space. And when you think about spaces that are built and human beings, the first spaces that we kind of come into, built spaces, are our homes. But soon thereafter, as very little people, we're exposed to a learning environment of some sort. And it might be preschool, it might be this our new, transitional kindergarten, it might be a classroom, like a kindergarten or first grade classroom. So the thought about the need for intentional creation of environments that will support and nurture children in these environments is like kind of mind-boggling. So I thought about that because we're going to be talking with Bridgitte Alomes from Natural Pod, and the story that she has to tell and share with us is pretty remarkable with the contributions that are being made to these early learning environments. So I want to say, Bridgitte, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, and thank you, Carolyn. I'm super excited to be here today.
You can call me CCB, okay?
I can call you CCB?
I want you to.
No way. And you can also call me Bridgie, or Bridgo, just so you know, or Brie.
Excellent. So everyone, you've got it. Now you're in the know. Okay, so first, we'd love to hear kind of the origin story. Tell us about the inspiration that drove you to decide that you needed to found a company creating what you create. So you're going to have to tell us why and what, okay?
Yeah, well, I certainly didn't start my career in the sustainable space or even in furniture or in education. In fact, I thought I was going to be a dancer and spend most of my life performing. And then I ended up in software and technology. And, life sort of evolved and changed and moved in many different directions. I think when we're kids, we have these big dreams, and mine was to be a dancer. So for me, fast forward, it wasn't until something really caught me off guard. And that actually was becoming a parent. Not becoming a parent caught me off guard. I was super excited about that. But it was that my child that had allergic reaction to a toxic chemical in a toy. And in that moment, when you're bringing in a new being into the world and they're very precious and you're taking care of them and you're learning the new ways of how to provide for them. And I also had a really strong aha moment and a moment of going, well, how am I going to change this not only for my children, but for the other children in the world? And that really changed the course of my life and became the catalyst of Natural Pod. And what I mean by that is that after he got sick, I couldn't help myself by starting to research all the materials that was used in children's products and in learning spaces, particularly in learning spaces and in the future of furniture, and always asking. And this is something that I'm incredibly curious, to the point where I'm always asking so many questions like, where did it come from? What is it made of? Tell me the story behind it. Like, who created this? And then I discovered quite quickly how much in our children's learning environments contained toxic glues, lead, formaldehyde, various chemicals that children under the age of 7 absorb more toxins than children over the age of 7. But I started also looking at these spaces thinking, where is the beauty? How does it feel like home? Is it a canvas? Where is the longevity? And will these materials go back to the earth? And what is the story behind them? And then after, connecting with other parents and of course with educators and really getting their pulse, it started to come alive. And here we are, many years later, we've impacted over 1 million students and 18,000 learning spaces. And really because of a aha moment and a need to provide something of better quality for my own family, and then wanting to support others.
So you may win the prize for best origin story about why you're doing what you're doing. I mean, that's remarkable and so authentically heartful, which is a wonderful basis, if you will, for the work that any of us do. So you decide you're going to do this, and you decide that furniture is going to be a way that you're going to make this shift in healthy environments for our children. How do you create a business making healthy furniture?
It really comes back to really focusing on our children. And I'm going to start with that, Cece. And I would say that our children and our communities depend on each of us to make decisions now that set us up for the future. And learning environments, like you said at the beginning here, that, often children start their lives at home and then they go into learning environments. And then they're often in their learning environments more than they are at home. And what does that learning environment speak to? Is it a space that's designed through a conscious choice? Is it actually designed with intentionality over perhaps a more convenient option, right? And I really believe that when a learning environment is holistically designed to truly serve the needs of the community, right? So a learning environment is a community hub. It can accomplish so much more than just your 9 to 3 during the day, right? Because those spaces are a hub where everyone can come together and it serves many, many purposes. The space that they're in, it matters, right? It should allow for free movement, bringing in the dance pieces. It should be beautiful and be a canvas to their learning environment, meaning that the color comes from their art and the documentation of learning and from their own creative ideas, not from a pre-described space that doesn't allow them to explore the freedom of movement and choice and agency. And really, coming back to the agency piece, it's about choice. And if we teach our young ones when they're in those learning spaces that if you can choose where you learn best, and I learned many years later that I had a choice, right? I learned that I could choose where I wanted to sit, stand, move, get uncomfortable, dance, whatever it might be to express something that I've learned. But I certainly didn't learn well being told where to sit all day. You know what I mean? And I like to wander. I want to look at the trees and nature that it's outside. And quite frankly, personally, I want children to be outdoors first and foremost. That's the most important thing. But if you're going to be in a space, is it intentional? Is it beautiful? Is it calm? Is it nourishing? Or does it feel like a space that is not functional and is not beautiful? And that can really change the energy of a child's experience during the day.
It's so fascinating to, well, be at my stage in life, to go back and think about what classrooms, looked like. And you want to talk about industrialization and, kind of linear processing, and how fascinating that is, that the human spirit and creative nature can even overcome those, because you think about all the folks that went through those types of environments and still came out astonishingly creative. So we have all of this you know evolving information about how we learn and what can promote, or I'm going to say, I'm going to keep coming back to that nurture word, nurturing the spirit and the soul of development of every single one of our children. So when you're thinking about designing, who do you work with to create the canvas, if you will?
Well, that's such an excellent question because ultimately who you work with are the end users, and the end users are children, right? The spaces that we're creating isn't about you or I. It's about the children that we're serving. And they have such a wondrous imagination of creativity where they can look at certain pieces and go, oh, it could be this, or it could be that, or I could use it for these pieces. So for us, we really start with the children, and we look at the educator that's holding the space for those children in that learning environment. but keeping in mind that holistically, a learning environment isn't just a classroom. And this is the interesting thing about design and space, is that children have that continuity of care, whether you're 4, 6, 8, 12, 18, or 88, right? We all have that continuity of care when we're thinking about space. And we want familiarity. We want to feel safe. So if a learning environment can have that consistency throughout the years of learning, and we're looking at the space as a holistic space rather than an individual classroom, and not cookie cutting the design, but really thinking about how does this piece, this experience grow with the individual? How does it grow with their learning? And knowing that this is a particular piece that's going to be here forever, right? How can it be repurposed and reused throughout those years? The other thing that I really think about is educators that are in the space or in their holistic learning environments, and that's the entire school, is shared resources. And I really want them to be really inspired to be there for themselves. Educators are doing some of the most important work in the world by holding our children through their learning journey to help us have more creative problem thinkers in the future, to help navigate somewhere the world is going. And that requires self regulation, self esteem, confidence, and courage. So I often ask the educators, are you inspired to be in here? Learning environments should be a space of freedom and fluidity, and often they become a space of storage, right? We've heard about that too, and doesn't have a lot of intention. So, and I mentioned before, and you hear me repeat it very frequently, but to bring in things into your space that tell a story, to bring back some of those values of when, when I was a child, you were a child, and we would talk about, well, when my grandparents immigrated from Holland, they brought these things, and they tell stories and bring in legacy. That changes a connection back to something in a space than it just being a piece of furniture that is providing a single function. It should be multi-purpose. It should grow with the child, and it should be used in any space within the learning environment, which is the entire space, not just within the four walls of a classroom.
I was mining your website, looking at all sorts of information, and the stories that you tell are well told stories. There's also stories from all over the world and many different communities. So when Naturopod calls itself a learning solutions company, you've opened the door to a much broader set of, well, to a much broader set of offerings. And the conversations that you promote, and you say very, very clearly that these spaces are designed in community, in conversation, developing with the users and the community. I'd love for you to tell us a couple of stories about the different kinds of communities that you've worked with to create the right space.
Well, I think it's interesting that you mentioned about solutions, and it's really about, providing a solution that transcends geographic regions, pedagogy, curriculum, religion, race, the whole thing. It's about providing equality and accessibility for all, right? And that transcends that. All of our spaces are intended to feel more like home than a traditional learning space. And traditionally, most spaces are bright and loud and very directive in how they intended to be used, right? So when I think about some recent experiences and stories, and these are the reasons why I do what I do, right? When the moment you walk into a school, and I'm going to talk about the Thrive Community School, which is the very first charter school here in Canada, in Edmonton, and it's a non-for-profit school, and it's a K-6 school, and they have food programs. They have an after-school program. These children get picked up in the morning and then taken back in the afternoon, and they're pretty much in their learning environment for a very significant portion of their day. The joy and the confidence and the freedom, and watching them choose where they want to be. And they were skipping in the hallways. They were having direct conversations with me. They were able to do that in a way that spoke to who they are. They used their voice. And to me, it's because they felt safe in that space. And that's one really incredible example. Another one would be in Huntington, West Virginia at Explorer Academy, that was built in an old high school. And Huntington, West Virginia has a very, very tough population economically and socially in their space. Again, witnessing the documentation of their projects and them showing those projects from the beginning to the end, and using the space to stand up on the tables and present, like they were standing to present their projects. And the joy, it's the smiles that you see where they're actually free, free to express who they are. And then one last one I want to speak about is the Environment Nature Center in Newport Beach, which is also a non-for-profit early learning space. And, often we talk about risky play and indoor and outdoor learning. And outside of this learning environment, which is completely open, they can bring everything indoors and out very, very comfortably. But there's these giant boulders in the middle of the walk space. And now most people would say they're too large, they're going to fall, they're going to do this. But children are so capable of understanding their physicality, and those moments of I did it. And if you can imagine every day that you can have a moment going, I did that, I accomplished this, it builds that confidence and self-esteem. So then when you go into the literacy and math concepts, which quite frankly should be after you build that foundation, seeing that in each of those spaces and across different geographic regions, to me, is that is the continuity of care. No matter where you are, it's that choice of freedom, joy, and that confidence. And I see it, to me, consistently how these lessons that the spaces are sharing, how they support beyond the core curriculum, and how they're supporting opportunities for a really deep social development and social emotional learning, just like they would at home, right? So recognizing that the home skills that we develop and that we learn are really foundational for our future. And they're consistent skills like sweeping the floor or doing the dishes or whatever it may be, although some people may not want to do them on a daily basis, right? But seeing the children at Thrive actually clean their own furniture and care for it, that it's not up to the custodian because they love it, because it's their home.
Hmm. That's just lovely. I'm reminded of our friend Laura Guido Clark, who runs Project Color Core, and that's about bringing color into learning environments and communities where it is bereft by virtue of socioeconomics and resources. And they engage the children in creating what is the color, what's the palette, what's the mural going to look like in the on the classroom walls, on the outside, in the playground, and the joy that is created and that sense of accomplishment is, it's so palpable. Even watching, even still photography, just like, wow. Okay, so I'm struck by, we work with loads and loads of education projects and learning environments, and whilst we might be interested in introducing some more creativity and some what we think are more appropriate solutions, sometimes there's pushback. And I'm wondering, how do you see that, and how do you manage that when there's lack of, I'm going to say, interest in change?
Well, I think everything in life comes down to what decision you make in the moment that you're in, right? So we know what we know and we know what we don't. But I think if we really view the world in the lens of what legacy am I leaving for the children in my care and future generations to come, then your decision making should be more informed with more of a long-term view, right? And that's also a part of, doing the best that we can until we know better, right? And know what you know and know what you don't. And so really what it comes down to is, I think about is, what is your intention? What is your purpose? And first of all, what can we repurpose and reuse that you already have in your learning environment? Because there is abundance of existing tools and furniture in educational facilities across the world in abundance. And if we look at what's happening in landfill and where a lot of that furniture will end up, how are we repurposing that first and foremost? And then when you're thinking about the space, are you considering the community hub that's coming through that space and how it could be used years to come? Now, Libraries are a perfect example of this because often they were created to house books, right? And to store those things. And then they often are changing and they're morphing and growing. Well, all spaces should be really used 24 hours a day if we possibly can as a community hub for adult workshops on the weekends. And we've got a couple of spaces that are used for weddings on the weekends. Like, it's unbelievable. But I really ask people to really think about, what is the legacy that you want to leave behind? What is the intention around your decision? And are you considering the longevity of that decision? Are you consciously aware of the impact of that choice? And why does it matter? Right? At the end of the day, it's not just furniture. Furniture is a part of a learning environment experience. It is a way of inspiring, it's a way of modeling best practice. And again, when you're touching something and you're going, okay, what is this really made of? And you're opening the undercover belly of what's underneath, and you can't address that, that's kind of concerning to me.
You got me to two of the points that I wanted to have you address. One was the idea of how is it made? How are the natural pod products made? And you addressed the concern and the well-being and the materiality a little bit up front, but I'd love for you to spend a little bit more time talking about that, particularly relative to becoming legacy and being healthy.
Yeah, great. And I'd be happy to share that with you. And I think that, every business has a business model, right? And I think that, if you're only a profit driven business, you're only going to view the business problem through that lens of what impact does this have on the profit. So for us, our business model has always been sustainably minded from the very beginning. It's been a part of our DNA. We're a triple bottom line focus, which means that we really consider all of the factors through the entire chain of the health of the planet, the impact on the community, whether it's sustainable, is it a regenerative choice? And so for us, we really focused on from the very beginning, everything is made here in British Columbia, right here in Canada. And we've been FSC certified from beginning, middle to end from the very beginning. We like to reach our highest standards. We're currently, to my knowledge, as of today, the only certified B Corp furniture manufacturer in North America, which is awesome. And yet a lot of opportunity for growth here, right? Which is, we are empowered to doing business for a force of good. Our product is designed to last a lifetime. We have a lifetime warranty because it should. There's no edges that are not exposed. We're not hiding anything of what's in the materiality, and that's really important. There's no formaldehyde, soy-based glues. Like, we can really go back to where it came from, which we talked about at the beginning, what it's made of, and what else it can be. What I mean by what else it can be and being multifunctional, because it's not just about the material, CC. That's one part of it. But a chair can only ever be a chair. And again, I've never been that individual that can sit down and be told what to do. So I don't like to be in a chair. I'd rather have something that could do multiple things. So we have benches that can become balance beams and boats and ramps and shelving. And when they told me in Rhode Island, they were like, I can see a giraffe, right? So if it can't be more than three things, we don't consider it. It needs to have multiple purpose, multiple age, and have that continuity of care. So no matter whether you're 4 or 34, you can still enjoy the same functional piece of that tool in your learning environment than someone at a young age.
You're reminding me to share with our audience the fact that on our website for the Wonder Podcast, there is, along with the transcript, there also are links to many of the things that we're talking about. So if you're looking for more information about Bridgitte and or Natural Pod, and you want to see some of these learning solutions, you will have the access to it. So just want to say that. I'm struck by a earlier conversation that you and I had, and the last podcast that I did which was with a fellow who builds senior living communities. And we were talking about like where else can this go. It's when you say learning solutions, it doesn't bracket it in an age group at all. That's first thing. But secondly, the idea that many different many different uses can be built into any particular design of a piece so that others can use it. And the fellow was talking about in his community, they look for things that the grandchildren can come in and play in, in the outside spaces, that actually are also therapeutic and or movement tools for the aging population. So talk to us a little bit about where you'd like to see natural pod go.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because one of my favorite books is Play by Dr. Stuart Brown. And I really believe no matter what age you are, it's so important to play in whatever that means for you. And what I'm looking at when I'm thinking about spaces and I talk about the continuity of care is why are only the fun spaces in early years? Right? Why do they have play lofts and play stands and these amazing things to climb? And then, we get to elementary and traditionally we're in rows and desks traditionally. And then we get to high school, more rows and desks traditionally. And then we get to university and guess what? We can choose where we want to be. How cool is that? And then we get into these amazing tech companies that have ping pong tables and all these great spaces. And then we may go into a senior's home that has more tables and chairs. So, what I'm curious about is why and who decided that was a great idea at some point. So, the question I have is, are we creating pieces that have that continuity of care, that are not age dependent, that are not specific or predetermined, that they couldn't expand and be other things? And why couldn't we have a play loft in a senior's home that the grandchildren or the children could come and visit and they could climb up and sit with them in there and read a book? Why can't that be the case? So I think it's about really expanding and being curious and creative and questioning why not, right? Why is it not possible? It's the same reason why I mentioned about the ENC, the Environmental Nature Center, about the rocks. Why can't we have rocks for children to explore? Why can't we have this beautiful biophilic design that is incorporating nature? So I think it comes down to designers and people that are holding the design process to really be curious about why not? Is it possible? And could we take some of the wonderful learnings from the early years where the joy is there and the laughter and the skipping is there? And how do we translate that through? Because there was a study out of Harvard, and I it's interesting because I often bring this up and everyone always giggles and they're like, well, they say you should only be sitting for the number of minutes of how old you are, right? And I often joke that I'm only 25, but just so you know, I'm not, right? But and they look at me and they're like, are you sure? And like, it's not possible, right? But if you're 4 years old, that's 4 minutes. So just saying that really, are these spaces for all, including the seniors, are they encouraging movement? We need to move our bodies. Are they allowing for creativity and imagination? Are they predetermined? And do they promote play in whatever way that could be for you? And I think curiosity, creativity, and questioning are really important when we're thinking about these spaces and design.
We're like at the end, which I can't even imagine because I actually had about 15 more questions that I wanted to ask you, but I can't. So I'm going to give you, Bridgitte, the last say. And it's always fun to say, what haven't we talked about that you think the audience should hear, or what have we talked about that you think is so important that needs to be reinforced?
Yeah, I think what really needs to be reinforced is the understanding that the work that we're all doing truly matters. We are creating spaces for our future generations to come, our future thought leaders. And students need us to create inspiring spaces where they can absolutely thrive now, today, and in their future. So those spaces should be the intersection of pedagogy, sustainability, and great design, not one or the other, right? And thinking about their wellness, their health and wellness needs to be at the heart of the decision-making process. We need educators to also understand that we care about their environments that they work in, and that we are going to help them hold space for our children. And the only way that can happen is through having collaborative and open and honest conversations and how we navigate those challenges and solutions together. I recently spent a week actually meeting with 7 different school districts and multiple educators. And it was not about a furniture conversation. It was about really holding space for them and hearing about what's inspiring their work, what challenges they're facing, and trying to find a solution that supports where they're currently at together. So sharing ideas. This isn't about buying more product, right? This isn't about adding more pieces to your learning environment. It's really understanding that you are directly impacting learning spaces and our children of the future. That would be the most important thing that I want to truly leave everybody with. And know that this work isn't easy, and it's not meant to be, right? And part of that is staying resilient, right? Prioritizing your passion and your perseverance, but knowing what you know and knowing what you don't, and being willing to learn and be willing to collaborate, but staying true to your values. Because if we don't speak up for our children and help them in their learning environments, who else is going to do that?
Well, the children that have anything to do with Naturopod certainly have you and your team and all of the folks who are committed to that curiosity and that collaboration and that building a community. It's been absolutely lovely hearing more about Naturopod, Bridgitte, and I would like to say thank you from the Wonder Podcast, and also remind all of our listeners that you'll be able to find more information on our webpage. And goodbye for today. Thank you.